I have always been a big social media enthusiast, especially with Facebook. I loved spending hours scrolling through my feed, seeing what my friends were up to, and catching up on the latest news and trends. One night, as I was scrolling through my phone, I received a notification of a new friend request. The profile name was Miller, and the photo showed an attractive man in an expensive suit posing next to a luxurious sports car. My curiosity was instantly piqued. I clicked on his profile to learn more. The photos I found were impressive. Miller was in luxurious places, high-class restaurants, exotic resorts, and always next to very expensive cars. The photo captions were inspirational, talking about hard work, success, and traveling the world. I was fascinated and, almost without thinking, accepted the friend request. To my surprise, a few minutes after accepting, I received a message from Miller thanking me for accepting the friend request. He started chatting in a polite and charming manner, soon introducing himself and sharing a bit about his life. He said he was a businessman and frequently traveled for work. His conversation was engaging, and I quickly found myself drawn to his glamorous lifestyle. In the following days, our conversations became more frequent and deeper. Miller was a great listener, always interested in what I had to say. We talked about our interests, dreams, and life experiences. He sent me photos of his recent travels and described the wonderful places he visited. It was impossible not to feel enchanted by someone so successful and attentive. After a few weeks of online conversations, Miller suggested that we meet in person. I won't lie. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of meeting someone I only knew virtually made me a bit nervous, but he managed to convince me with his sweetness and persistence. I agreed to meet him, and we arranged to meet at a chic cafe in the city center. On the day of the meeting, I woke up anxious and spent hours choosing the perfect outfit. I wanted to make a good impression, so I opted for an elegant dress and high heels. When I arrived at the cafe, my heart was racing. There was Miller, exactly like in the photos, perhaps even more charming in person. He greeted me with a warm smile and led me to a reserved table. We ordered coffee and started talking. Miller was even more captivating in person. He asked questions about my life, my interests, and dreams, always with an attentive look and an encouraging smile. I felt special and valued. Time flew by, and soon he suggested we take a walk. I felt a bit apprehensive, but his persistence and charm eventually convinced me. We walked to his car, a luxurious sports vehicle parked near the cafe. He opened the door for me with a gallant gesture, and I got in. As he drove, I noticed that we were moving away from the city center. I asked where we were going, and he replied with an enigmatic smile, saying he had a surprise for me. As we got further and further away from the city, I started to feel uncomfortable. I insisted that he tell me where we were going, but he just laughed and changed the subject. My discomfort turned into panic when I realized he was speeding up. It didn't take long before we were on a deserted road with no signs of civilization around. I tried to open the car door, but it was locked. And even if it had opened, the speed he was driving made it impossible to jump out of the car. Fear took over me, and my mind started imagining the worst scenarios. I told Miller that I wanted to go back to the city, but he ignored my pleas. Desperate, I took out my phone and called a friend, trying to pretend everything was fine. I told them where I was and asked them to wait for me in a public place. Miller didn't seem to care, but shortly after, he made a sharp turn and stopped the car. Before he could do anything, I used the opportunity to unlock the door and ran as fast as I could. My heart was pounding, and I didn't look back. I noticed he tried to chase me on foot, but a car approaching us probably disrupted his plans. I ran towards the car, waving frantically, and luckily, the driver stopped. I got into that car without saying anything. On the way back, I tried to explain what had happened to the driver, but I was almost out of breath and full of fear. He was kind and understanding, and soon we were back to the safety of the city. As soon as I got home, I blocked Miller on all social media and reported the incident to the police. I never heard from him again, but the incident left a deep mark on me. I learned a valuable lesson about trusting strangers on the internet and the importance of being cautious. That day could have ended tragically, but I was lucky to escape. Now, I am much more careful about who I accept as friends online and the meetings I arrange. I had been looking for a place to live for weeks. My current lease was about to expire, and I needed a new apartment quickly. Like many people, I decided to use Facebook to look for rental ads. I spent hours browsing real estate groups and classified pages, hoping to find something that fit my budget. That's when I came across an ad that seemed perfect. The photos showed a well-decorated apartment with a central location and a very reasonable price. The owner of the ad, a man named Robert, seemed very friendly in the description. He mentioned that the rent was cheap because he was moving abroad and wanted to rent the place quickly. Without thinking twice, I sent him a message expressing my interest. Robert replied quickly. He was very polite and helpful, saying he was happy to find someone interested in taking care of the apartment while he was away. We arranged a meeting for the next day so I could see the apartment in person. The idea of finally finding a place to live filled me with relief and excitement. The next day, I arrived at the address Robert had given me. It was an old building, but well maintained. I waited a few minutes until he appeared. Robert was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, and with a welcoming smile. He greeted me warmly and invited me to come up. The apartment was exactly like the photos, spacious, well-lit, and tastefully decorated. As we walked through the place, Robert told me a bit about the neighborhood and the benefits of living there. He seemed very trustworthy and genuinely interested in ensuring I would be comfortable. I began to imagine what it would be like to live there, and everything seemed to fit perfectly. After showing me the apartment, Robert suggested we go for a coffee at a nearby bakery to discuss the contract details. I thought it was a great idea since I wanted to clarify some doubts before making any decision. We went to the bakery, sat down, and started talking. While we were having coffee, Robert began talking about the need for a security deposit. He mentioned that he needed the money in advance to cover his moving expenses abroad. I thought the amount was a bit high, but he was persuasive, explaining that it was standard procedure and that I would get the money back at the end of the lease, provided there were no damages to the apartment. I started feeling a slight discomfort. Something about the way he insisted on the deposit made me uneasy, but I tried to ignore my intuition, thinking it was just excessive caution. However, as the conversation progressed, Robert's behavior started to change. He became more insistent, almost demanding about the immediate payment of the deposit. I decided I needed more time to think and asked to take the contract home and review it calmly. Robert, visibly irritated, tried to convince me to sign it right there, claiming that there were other interested parties and that I might lose the opportunity if I didn't act quickly. The pressure mounted, and I began to feel really uncomfortable. With some excuse, I said I needed to go to the bathroom. I took my phone with me and sent a message to a friend explaining the situation and asking for his opinion. He quickly replied, telling me to be cautious and not to sign anything without being absolutely sure. His advice gave me the courage I needed. I returned to the table and told Robert that I needed more time to think. He was visibly irritated, and his friendly expression disappeared. He tried to argue once more, but I held my ground. I thanked him for the coffee and the apartment visit and said I would get in touch soon. As I said goodbye to Robert, I felt a great relief. Something about the whole situation didn't seem right, and I was happy I had followed my intuition. In the following days, I researched more about rental scams and discovered several stories similar to mine. I realized I could have fallen into a dangerous trap. I decided to continue my search for a new place to live, but this time being much more cautious. I avoided ads that seemed too good to be true and always insisted on seeing the contract in advance. I shared my experience with friends and family, and everyone was shocked at how convincing Robert had been. Finally, after much searching, I found a perfect apartment through a trusted real estate agency. The process was transparent and safe, and I was able to move in without any worries.